Good afternoon, everyone. Hello. My name is Nan Richardson, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to the fourth webinar in this series. We would like to thank the National Association of Music Merchants, NAM, the National Piano Foundation, NPF, and the Music Teachers National Association, MTNA, for supporting this webinar series. We hope that you will join us for our final two webinars that will take place on November the 5th and also on December the 3rd. Today, our session is titled Group Teaching Basics, Methods, Materials, and Making It Work. This session is being recorded, and a copy of the PowerPoint, the chat, and the audio visual will be available on pianonet.com, so don't feel like you need to take notes as this reference will be available to you. We have three presenters today. Myself, I'm Nan Richardson from Salisbury, Maryland, Dr. Emily Book McGree from Boulder, Colorado, and Dr. Rebecca Bolello from Baton Rouge, Louisiana. All three of us have been teaching group piano for many years, and in this webinar we are going to share ideas about how to structure and pace a group lesson. We're going to talk about the importance of transitions from one activity to another and provide some examples of transitions, and we are also going to share some methods and materials that we have used in our classes and currently use in our classes. So let's get started. Most group classes that I teach are 60 minutes in length, and when I'm planning them, I think, okay, how can I best utilize this hour that I'm going to have with my students? How am I going to stay on track? How can I best transition from one activity or one piece to the next? And then how am I going to keep my students engaged as a group for that entire lesson or class? So I'm going to share a structure that I like to use and that I follow with my classes that are both adult classes and that are elementary aged classes. You will find that I have anywhere from 8 to 10 different activities within an hour, and that is a lot of things to do within an hour, but it's important to keep things moving, to keep my pacing. And I always like to hear at the end of class, wow, that class went by so fast. That tells me that I'm keeping my students engaged and that my pacing is on point. I like to start every class with an opening activity. I think that the opening activity and the closing activities of a class, they set the tone, they set the feel, it shapes the attitude, and it facilitates a positive, cohesive community among the class members. In the first webinar of this series from September the 10th, I spoke in detail about the lesson sandwich, and I talked about the bread of a sandwich being really important because it holds that sandwich together, and likewise the opening and closing activities of your sandwich or of your lesson really put your lesson and make it nice and tight and hold it together. So if you are interested in listening to some of the ideas for opening activities, you can go back and watch that on pianonet.com. So with the opening activities, regardless of what you do with your opening activities, you can ask yourself, are they fun? Because they need to be fun. And if you're not having fun, your students aren't having fun. Are they activities that make everyone feel comfortable and engage everyone? And then finally, they shouldn't last for more than 5 minutes. So those are three things that I always keep in mind when I'm planning my opening activity. Following that, I do some type of warm-up or technique that can range from a simple pentascale to cadences, chords, an etude, a drill, just warming up the fingers and the body. And then I will do a review piece, something that we did the prior class. And with the review piece, I like to focus on one thing. And that one thing might be pedaling, or it might be dynamics. It might be shaping a phrase and working on tapering the end of a phrase. It might be balance. So even though there are lots of things you hope your students are thinking about and working toward, I find it to be very beneficial to say today in this review piece, we're going to work on focusing on this one particular component within this piece. So we have our review piece with our one focus. Following that, we do partner our ensemble playing. I do use a lot of pop sheet music or lead sheets with harmonization. And with my students, I will introduce that particular piece, and then I will divide them up into partners. And one partner will be responsible for the melody, and the other partner will be responsible for harmonizing that melody, either with root tones or with chords, and then they can switch places. Now, during COVID times, we're not together, so I can send those students to breakout rooms, 2 people per room, and they can work on those things separately, and they can play for one another. The other thing that I do during that time is multi-piano ensemble pieces. So we would still be working as a group, but we would all have different parts, or there would be a few people on the same part. All right, following along in my structure, at that point I really introduce the meat of my lesson. What is the main concept that I'm trying to get across to the students that day? And if I am introducing new repertoire, I'd kind of do it at the midpoint of the lesson. And then at that time I usually break off for an activity or a game. Now this would obviously look very different depending on whether I was teaching an adult class or if I was teaching an elementary aged class. An activity or a game for an adult might look something like a question of the day. So for my adult students, I would have everybody stand up. We need a break from sitting at the piano. And the question of the day might be as simple as, if you could travel anywhere that you could go right now, where would you travel? And I'll pair them with somebody to talk about that. I might do a brain break. If you're not familiar with what brain breaks are, I will put a website in the chat at the end of my portion of this presentation, and you're welcome to check that out. But if you just Google brain breaks, you will find many resources. They are just quick 1 to 2 minute activities. They are useful for adults and children alike. No preparation, no extra materials. And let's just do one right now so that you know what I'm talking about for a brain break. Okay, so everybody hold up one hand and just wave it back and forth. Go ahead, you can do it. All right, now you've got that hand. Okay, now stop that hand. Now take your other hand and just make it go up and down. Up and down. Okay, now do both of those things at the same time and try not to move either hand in a diagonal motion. Okay, now switch. Make this hand go up and down and make this hand go back and forth. And try, that one's harder for me. And try not to move in a diagonal motion. And stop. So that's a brain break. It's just something that will break up your class. Usually some people will have trouble with it. It'll make you laugh, just get you to think about something else. So that's an example of an activity that I might use during that time. With kids, this is again a great time to play games. We're going to be talking about different games in our next webinar. And then also an activity might be a sight singing activity, a sight reading activity, a rhythm activity. But this is always changing within my structure. Like I'll have the activity in the game at this point in the lesson, but what it is always rotating or changing. And then after that, I will do a review or a new piece, possibly some theory, just depending on where we are in our unit or within our class. And then finally, a closing activity. Now, when I'm getting ready to teach my class, I have all that in my mind and I've got it ready. But I have found recently that my students also really like to know what's going on at the beginning of class. So I've started having a checklist at the front of my room. For my elementary students, I have found that if I designate someone as the checker offer, that's a really popular job to have because you can hold a marker and go to the front of the room and you can check off and kind of keep us in line about where we are. With my adult students, that's really not a very fun job to have, so I just print off a copy for them and they have it at their keyboard. Some of them actually do check it off. I can see them during the lesson. For others, it just serves as a visual. So if you've never provided your students with a plan as you go into your class, I encourage you to at least try it because a lot of people enjoy knowing what to expect before it happens within your class. So I'd like to move on and talk a little bit about transitions. Transitions are a key part of having a successful group class. Now, the first thing I want to talk about is a known space, because we don't always think about coming into class as a transition, but it actually is, because you're not in class and then you are in class. So that in itself is a transition. And when you come into your class or your lesson and you don't have a place that you belong or a place to go, that can sometimes be a little bit unnerving. So I always have a name tag or a name spot or an index card, even for my adult students. So when they walk in the room, they're like, that's my name. I go there. I belong here. So known spaces have been really successful and beneficial for me. And again, I do that with adults and children alike. Now, the following bullet points that you see on this page: hello songs, goodbye songs, line up songs, get it together songs, all of those would pertain to children elementary age. I have recorded some of my favorite transition songs that I'm going to share with you, but I would like to talk a little bit about Get It Together songs, because I have probably made up that title. You know, if something funny happens in your class and everyone ah ha ha is laughing and you've lost everybody, right? Because everyone's focus is now everywhere. You got to get it together. You got to make everybody's focus come back and get back on task. And so I have two of my favorite activities that I do to get us all back together. So keep in mind, if you want to go and watch any of these after this webinar and try some of them out on your own, you can do that at pianonet.com either later today or tomorrow. So here are a few transition songs that I find useful in class.
This first song can be adjusted to your specific class. I'm going to sing Welcome to Piano, but you could change the words to Welcome to Music or Welcome to Guitar, whatever you're teaching. You'll notice when I sing something twice, that's when the students will be echoing me back, so I'll sing that part softer. Welcome to piano, welcome to piano, glad you're here, glad you're here. Gonna do some playing, gonna do some playing, gonna use our ears, gonna use our ears. We're going to have a lot of fun, because music time has just begun. Welcome to piano, welcome to piano, glad you're here, glad you're here. The next song is a goodbye song, and again, there's some echo that can happen, and after your class gets used to singing the song, you can take the echo parts out, and you don't have to put them in anymore. It's time to say goodbye, it's time to say goodbye, it's time to take a bow, it's time to take a bow. We've tried our very best, we've tried our very best, and now it's time to take a rest, and now it's time to take a rest. It's time to say goodbye, it's time to say goodbye, 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 goodbye. Here's another song that is a goodbye song. Fare thee well, now we must part. I will give you a song to keep in your heart. We have had a lot of fun. Thank you for the things you've done. Goodbye, good luck, goodbye, good luck. Fare thee well, now we must part. I will leave you a song to keep in your heart. We have had a lot of fun. Thank you for the things you've done. Goodbye, good luck, goodbye, good luck. Then there's the line-up song. If kids are lining up as they come in your room or as they leave your room, it goes like this. You might recognize the tune. My feet are facing forward, my hands are by my side, my lips are zipped together, and now we're in a line. Show me a line, Show me a line. Show me a line. That would be fine. Show me a line. Then we have what I like to call the get it together songs. So if things aren't all organized in your class and lots of people are talking, you just start singing one of these songs and everybody sings along. My hands upon my head I place, upon my shoulders, on my face, on my waist and by my side, then behind me they will hide. Then I'll raise them way up high and let my fingers fly, fly, fly. Clap, 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 and a 1, 2, 3. See how quiet we can be. And then you have everyone's attention again. Another way that I like to get people's attention when I have a group of younger elementary age students is if it's loud and no one's paying attention, I'll just go, if you can hear me, touch your nose. If you can hear me, touch your ears. If you can hear me, touch your chin. And pretty quickly, everyone will have their attention to you as well.
Okay, so those are just a few ideas of transition songs. Songs really can help flow from one activity to the next. And then also today, I just want to mention an online method that I've really enjoyed using this year. I have started using Innovative Piano. It's been very helpful, especially during COVID times, because it is all online. What I like about it is that it's this huge resource of repertoire, duets, multi-piano ensembles, keyboard awareness. There are lots of short instructional videos that are 3 to 5 minutes long. There's this whole big library of information. And depending on what type of class I'm teaching, adult, elementary, a class with teenagers, if it's a beginning class, if it's an intermediate class, I can pick and choose what resources I want to use and make a workbook for that specific class. So I get to have the freedom to create my own class curriculum, and I get to pull from this really big library. So it is kind of a learning curve as you discover how to navigate the website and how to work out a workbook and get your students all in line with one. But once you figure that out, it is just such a helpful resource to have at your fingertips. So if you haven't looked at it, there is a free trial, and I encourage you to do that. Another good resource and a good supplementary material, these have been around for a long time, but they're favorites among my adult RMM classes. The Simply Classic books with Margaret Goldston, books 1 and 2. People come in and they want to play pieces that they know, but perhaps that piece is not accessible to them. Like if somebody walks in and says, I want to play Clair de Lune, you're like, it's going to take you a couple years, right? But an arrangement of that is available. And so you can see here what is in that book for book 1. And then she also has the classical, the orchestral and operatic masterworks. So again, familiar tunes, accessible arrangements for adults. All right, so at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Dr. Emily Book McGree from Boulder, Colorado.
Hello, folks. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to pull up my PowerPoint here so that you all can follow along with me. All right. Okay. So as Nan mentioned, my name is Emily. I teach RMM in 2 different scenarios. One is at Lamont School of Music down in Denver, Colorado. I run the piano prep and the piano pedagogy programs down there. And the other is at my own private academy in Lafayette, Colorado. So I teach group child classes in both locations in adult RMM classes in my private academy. So today I'm going to walk you through the beginning materials that I use in both teaching scenarios. So first I'm going to talk about my kiddo group classes. I've chosen Piano Safari for a variety of reasons for the group child classes that I teach. This method is authored by Julie Nair and Catherine Fisher. It is self-published, meaning you'll need to purchase this method off of their website, pianosafari.com, instead of places like your local music shop or on Amazon. The book that I have featured here on the screen is the first level in the Piano Safari series. Currently, there are 3 levels in the series, and each book has a repertoire book and sight reading cards that go with it, and then also a theory book. I tend to use just the repertoire book and the sight reading cards in my group classes and supplement out for theory. And I'll give you some examples of that here in a bit. That being said, I will say that there are theory pages included in the repertoire book that reinforce concepts that you might be working on in that particular unit. So it's not totally necessary to have a separate theory book for this. You can also buy a lesson pack, which includes the repertoire book and the sight reading cards. Currently, that costs just $32.50. I find the sight reading cards to be super useful for both my private lessons and my group classes. So they come like this. You can see that they're color coded, so it's very easy to keep track of which unit you are in and where to start for that week. Each card has 2 short musical examples for the student to play, and also a rhythm exercise to work on. So here's an example. I'm going to hold it in front of my shirt here so that you can see it. This is from the very first unit of Piano Safari. It's focusing on the 3 black keys, and you can see there are 2 different musical examples followed by a rhythm example at the bottom of the page. So I use those actually quite frequently in my adult and teen classes, depending on the age. There are also 3 levels of this series for older beginners that I use quite frequently for supplemental materials for my teen classes and my adult group classes too. And now I'm going to show you one of the reasons that I really love this method right now, especially during COVID. The video resources that they make available for the teacher and the student are huge time savers, and we all need time saving things right now. This provides a wonderful sense of review for the student throughout the week and helps them practice throughout the week. I also don't have to make my own videos, which is wonderful. So there are many video resources for level 1 for the Piano Safari series right now. There are less for the 2 and 3, but they do have their own YouTube channel. So I would keep an eye out on that because they seem to be adding resources regularly. I'm going to show you an example from the very first unit here. This is called Lion Paw, and it's an example of how they incorporate technique from the very beginning. And you can also see a little bit of the instructional videos that they use here.
To play Lion Paw with the right hand, I play with a heavy dropping arm with finger 2 on D, starting on middle D. To play Lion Paw with the right hand, I play with a heavy dropping arm with finger 2 on D, starting on middle D. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4, and back down. 2, 3, 4. 2, 3, 4.
So that's an example of a video from the very, very first unit. And it's wonderful for students to be able to access that through the week and remind them what you have talked about in your classes. Okay, now in my pedagogy classes, I always make the students answer the why first before we make a choice. So why are we doing this as teachers? Why have we chosen this method? Why are we sequencing this way? So I thought I'd give you the why for why I feel like students really respond to this method. So as a teacher, we need to make sure that things are pedagogically sound and sequenced in the correct way. And that is absolutely there with this method. But I think that these things are above and beyond takeaways for this particular series. The first is inclusion of the rote pieces. These are repertoire examples that are generally a bit more challenging than the other exercises in the unit. Students learn these by ear, which they love because it gives them a variation of our normal learning process. And they're really proud of them. They generally enjoy practicing them, and they are pieces that they just keep coming back to and back to. So they're really, really wonderful selections. Second is the animal theme. Almost all of the exercises and repertoire examples in this method incorporate some sort of animal. So you can see I have my little lion that I use for teaching Lion Paw. And students just, it gives them a really tangible way to experience the music with something that they're familiar to. The animals are incorporated both in the title and the lyrics, so it just makes it really approachable for the students. Now, as the teacher, I really love the comprehensive technique that's taught all the way from the ground up. So you had an example of that with Lion Paws. And I feel that it's done in a way that students can really understand how their body needs to emulate a movement For example, when teaching rotation, and this happens at the in the first few units of the book, they talk about monkey swinging. So students can understand how their hand needs to move. And because it's related to an animal, I feel like they really understand this a little bit better. The pre-reading excitement is one of the reasons that really roped me into this series. The exercises are really wonderful. They're exciting and it draws them into learning the piano right away, and makes them feel successful because they're playing pieces that they really are happy to show off. For example, there's an ensemble piece arranged by Carolyn Shack of I Love Coffee, I Love Tea. Students really can't get enough of this piece. They play it over and over and over again. And that brings me to my next point. Ensembles. There are lots of ensembles throughout this piece. The I Love Coffee, I Love Tea is an example of that, but there are lots of duets throughout every single unit, which makes group work really fun and interesting for the students. Lastly, my students really love the inclusion of the standard repertoire that's in the methods as well. And I found that this prepares them excellently for moving into supplemental intermediate repertoire. And I usually can do this at an earlier developmental level with this particular series. So that in a nutshell is why I've chosen this series. Now let's chat about adult methods. As I was finalizing my PowerPoint last night, I was thinking I should have just made Brenda talk about this. So Brenda, feel free to unmute yourself and chime in if you want to at any point. And I'm sorry if I'm stepping on your toes here. So as we've mentioned in past webinars, it's really important for your adult students to have choices about what they're learning in their classes. As at the beginning of every session, I always give my adult students a tour of a bunch of different options out there. And I'll tell you 9 times out of 10, they choose the Piano Fun book. So this is a book published by Hal Leonard, authored by Brenda Dillon. And the main reason that my students really love this book is the inclusion of popular and familiar tunes. They feel much more comfortable learning a new skill if and learning how to read on the staff, if they know what the song is supposed to sound like. So it gives them a lot of confidence moving forward. This text also gives students a really strong foundation in chords, which makes it easy to jump off into really any popular, familiar songs that they might want to play in the future. I typically do supplement this with theory and technique books, which I'll give you a quick snapshot of here in a bit. On the right of your screen, you will also see a picture of the Recreational Music Making Handbook that was authored by Brenda Dillon and Brian Chung. So it's published by Alfred and really a wonderful tool to use if RMM is new to you and you're interested in starting a program. So they answer questions about the philosophy of RMM, how to structure your classes, make flyers, and even approach your local retailer to develop a partnership if that's something that you're looking for. Okay, back to Piano Fun. So this is an example of the modules that are included in this book. It's set up in 8 different modules. I find that this usually takes me 2 sessions of RMM classes to get through. My sessions are generally 8 weeks. So this typically encompasses 16 weeks of material for me. I know that some classes move faster and some move slower, so obviously take it at the pace that your adults are comfortable with. The text starts with pre-reading on the Black Keys, and there are songs like Amazing Grace and Jolly Old St. Nicholas in there, so students really know them and they're happy to play them. The next module moves to more keyboard geography, so you go to the white keys then. We move from there into pre-staff reading and rhythm, so introductions of quarter notes, half notes, whole notes, followed by the grand staff, then directional reading. So this is getting your adults to understand steps and skips and different interval contents that might happen in songs. Module 6 is more rhythm, so this is the dotted quarter note and eighth notes. Module 7 introduces chords and lead sheets. And I'll mention one thing that I really love about the sequence of this. There is when the Saints Go Marching In included in Module 7, and this is the very first piece that students are starting to learn their chords with too. But they've also learned this piece earlier on in the book. So they're applying something that's unknown to the known, and that really makes them feel more comfortable accessing chords, which can be a tricky thing for adults. And then we followed up with major and minor triads at the very end of the module, or sorry, of the text. So the other reason that I really love the Piano Fun series is the supplemental books that Brenda has included here. She has authored. There are classical favorites. So That's an example of this. There's also a pop one, a folk tune one, even a Christmas book, and they're wonderful jumping off points from the Piano Fun series. On your screen there, you see an example of Canon in D, which is from the Classical Favorites book. One of the other reasons that I really love these texts, and I actually use these for my middle school, my high school, and my adult classes. I find that all of those different age groups really love them. I create ensembles out of them. So Brenda, I hope that's okay with you. But I give them, she's giving me a thumbs up. Good. That we have one student that can just choose the melody line, one that can just choose the bass line, one that can do the chords, one that can play both hands as written. So you see on the left of your screen, there's a two-hand realization of of Canon in D there. So if you have students at different levels, this makes it really seamless to provide examples for them to be successful with. So I do ensembles all the time with my high school classes too. Series, so definitely check that out if it's something that you are unfamiliar with. I mentioned theory and technique that I tend to supplement with. These are just a quick snapshot of the collections that I typically use. At the top left of the screen, you'll see the Spirito theory workbook. Looks like this. It's spiral bound. It's from the Three Cranky Women, which hopefully all of you are familiar with them, from the Theory Gymnastics series. It's published by Chose. There are a variety of different levels within this series. So if you have an older group class, or you have someone who's just a little bit farther along, there are lots of different options in here. The Spirito one is typically the one that I start kids off with for my 6 to 10-year-old group classes. There's this little guy here, Tucker the Tiger, that takes students through the theory method, and he introduces new concepts, he tells jokes along the way, and does fun games with them. So they really, really enjoy this one. I use the Fundamental of Piano Theories for my adult classes. And then on the bottom row, you will see some technique choices. I typically use the Faber Piano Adventures scale and chord book for both my little K classes and my adult classes. This particular level is full scale, so not 5-finger patterns, and it introduces all of your major scales, your minor scales, and basic chords in there too. So I found that one to be a wonderful resource for them. And last but not least, I have the Czerny book in here, which is a relatively new resource from Piano Safari, which you can buy on their website again. And it's a really wonderful compilation of technique that I use for my adults too. They've really loved that book. So just some ideas for you to get your thinking caps on. Games. Now we're going to be talking a lot about these games, different games too, in the next webinar, but I thought I'd give you a snapshot of them. These are ones that I have found to be really useful moving my group classes onto the online platform. I'll show you some examples of this one. The first one is Wacky Wanda. There's the two levels of this, Wacky Wanda and Wacky Walter. Wacky Wanda focuses just on one clef at a time, so just treble clef or bass clef. Wacky Walter does both at the same time. So they have flashcards with a collection of notes, and the students have to figure out what the word is. You can do this really easily online if they've got a dry erase board, or just simply typing in their answer into chat, and that makes it easy for the student to or easy for the teacher to assess whether or not your students are understanding. I also use this for my pre-reading kiddos. I can hold up a word, and they have to find these letters on their keyboard. So it's also a really easy way to review high and low concepts. Finger 2, I need you to find finger 2 with a high B, and you can incorporate all of those review aspects that are important for those group classes. Musical spoons, hopefully you all have played spoons at some point in your life. If you haven't, please do, because it's so fun. But this is one that students really adore. This is a series that has 3 different levels in it. The picture on your screen are notes. There are also key signatures and chord versions of this. So when we are in person, this is hands down my students' favorite activity to do. But I also keep these cards close by when I'm teaching to address note names on the staff, or just, as you can see, they also have pictures with an X marked on the keyboard. So for your very beginning group class, this is also a wonderful assessment tool to see if they're understanding where all of their musical alphabets is falling on the keyboard. Tapping telephones and rocking rhythms are examples of ensembles that I do for rhythm. So I mentioned last webinar about the practice packets that I sent home with all of my students. And in that practice packet, there's a set of chopsticks, which might sound weird, but they're wonderful tools for actually tapping out rhythms. But they could, of course, use anything around their house, bells. They can make different sounds on the keyboards, whatever works for you. But they are cards that I can put up on my screen. And you see this as ensemble 6. So there are multiple cards for one ensemble. So I can choose whichever ones I want to do, throw it up on my screen share for them. And each one of them can focus on a different one and create an ensemble that way. As the teacher too, I can also tap or clap a rhythm from one of the cards and make them find where it is on the screen. So also another really wonderful assessment tool to use. The tapping telephones are very similar. And these are wonderful cards to, we all played that telephone game when we were little, where you tap a rhythm on one person's shoulder and then they have to pass it around the room, and you see if when they get to the end of the circle, if the rhythm is correct or not. These can also be fabulous cards for improv and compositional activities too. All right, the last thing that I'm going to chat with you about today is my workspace. We've had a lot of questions about what does it look like when you're teaching online? So I'm going to show you my before picture. So this is typically what my room looks like when I'm teaching online at the very beginning of the day. So you can see I've got a webcam set up, my laptop, I've got my iPad, a microphone if I need it. I also have some baskets sitting next to the piano with flashcards, games that I might be using for that day, different things to pull out during classes. And I also have cups with manipulatives in them. So they might be like animal eraser tops that we're going to move around the keyboard, or stickers that I'm going to place on the actual keys to help students. And then I lost my stuffy, yes. Different puppets or stuffies that I use to help teach them technique. Dry erase board, and then I've got all of my books stacked in levels, so I know exactly where to go. I typically teach all of my classes on Zoom because this allows me to screen share really easily for theory activities or games that we might be doing. And it allows me to toggle back and forth between my webcam to show them the piano keys and to my face if I just want to talk to them directly. Now, I'm going to hope that you all will be empathetic here and not judgmental, but here's what my studio looks at the end of the day, complete with a half-eaten lunch there that I actually never got around to eating. So just to show you, like, it can be chaos around you, but that's not what your students experience. So all in the vein of making it work. So with that, I will pass it along to my wonderful colleague, Rebecca.
All right, thanks, Emily. And hello, everyone. Good afternoon. I'm going to do a quick screen share to get my PowerPoint. All right, great. Let's get this here. Okay, great. I'm really glad to be here with you all this afternoon, and thanks for joining us. So I'm going to show a few of my favorite books for both children's classes and my adult group classes, and then share just a few quick tips that I use to make it work, to make my group classes work. So I'm going to start with my children's classes, and these are a few of my favorite go-to books. And you can see there's a variety here. So I use different books, sometimes for just different ages, and certainly different seasons, depending on the class needs. I usually use a mix of books also. So I might have one book as a main text, and then use another book from a different series. So like maybe a theory book or a technique book as a supplemental book. So I want to highlight a book that's a little bit newer to me, and that's the book that's on the left here, Wonder Keys. That book is by Andrea and Trevor Dow. They run the website teachpianotoday.com. If you've visited that or are familiar with that website, it's a great resource for your studio. And they also run the piano site pianogameclub.com, which is a subscription website if you are interested in getting fresh new games each month. That's a subscription-based service, pianogameclub.com. But back to Wonder Keys. So Wonder Keys is available for a few different ages. They do even have preschool books. The book here is the primer book, and then they also have elementary and intermediate levels and lots of supplemental books as well. So I'll show you a few sample pages here. I'm currently using this primer book for an age 5 to 6 year old beginner class. you can see that the books are really friendly for kids. It's in a comic book style format. And so you read the story and for each unit, and it highlights one of the Wonder Keys characters. There's 4 animal characters with the books. And then within each little story, there's a few little activities that you can do, intro activities. And then there are some short examples to do. That's called Practice on the Pathway. And then they have their songs that they play. And there's also a game included with some of the units, which is really nice because the kids will have that at home in their book that they can, play with a family member at home. So I found that this story format and the characters are just really friendly with kids. It works really well with a beginner young children's group class. Another really big draw for me with these books is all of the additional teacher support and extra materials available. There are just a ton of free resources, so guides for the teachers, even resources for parents, assignment pages, even more games and printables, all free on their Wonder Keys website. So even if you wanted to just check out what resources they have, even if you're using a different series, you might could check that out. And their Facebook page is also a really useful site with lots of tips and tricks about teaching both private and for group settings as well. So that was a really big selling point for me about these books. So jumping off of this book now, I want to mention 2 things that I use on almost a weekly basis with my kids to make it work in my kids' classes. I've had a lot of success with these. And the first is my manipulatives that I use. So I want to bring these characters to life out of these books for the kids. And so I have finger puppets for my Wonder Keys animal friends. So this is Maxine the skunk. This is Ruby the rabbit. This is Sheldon the squirrel. And this is Gary the bear. And so this is really exciting for the kids. It is a classroom management tool, but the kids don't see it that way. They just see these friends and almost like a reward. The kids can they can hold these sometimes. They will certainly go sit by the kids while they're at their pianos playing. It is much more effective for me to say, Sheldon the squirrel would like to hear you play that 3 times in a row. Can you do that for Sheldon the squirrel? That's much more effective to hear from Sheldon the squirrel than it is from their teacher. And I also use fuzzies, and that's the picture that you see on the screen here. I use that with my older classes, my 7 and 8-year-old beginner classes. Fuzzies are recommended actually in the Piano Safari book for a way to work on technique when you're first working on hand position and technique. But I actually use the fuzzies in the same way as a manipulative. So throughout my class, and I'll say even my little 8-year-old boys, they like these guys, and kind of the same thing. They'll sit by the students at their piano. They get to hold these fuzzies. It's just a good support in class for good behavior and for staying on task in our class. So checklists, we've already talked about checklists today, but checklists are a really great thing even for our kids' classes. Like you've heard, it is a great thing to put up at the beginning of class. And maybe for kids, you could put either a picture or just a quick word of what will be covered in class for that day, what's to be expected for that class. And it does give the kids a sense of accomplishment as they get down that list. They finish every one of those tasks. It helps the kids to manage their time better for the class as well. So of course, kids will enjoy marking off those tasks, either a check mark or a sticker or a stamp, magnet, even if it's on like a whiteboard. But online, if you're teaching online, you could screen share your checklist, and the kids could, you can have one student, if you give them the annotate option, they could put a stamp by each task on the checklist. So you could have one student do that, and that's a lot of fun. So I'm going to move next to my adult classes and show you a few of my favorite go-to books for my adult classes. So I have used all of these books at some point. A few I'm even using currently right now, teaching some classes. And so the 2 books that I would like to highlight from these are the one right in the middle, The Piano Ensembles by Hal Leonard, And then the one right behind that, the chord time piano, and that's from the Faber piano supplemental books. So the piano ensembles books, these are now on the left of the screen. These have been around a long time, but they're oldies but goodies. They really are good ensembles. I usually can find pieces from one of these levels of books for my classes. They are arranged in 4-part, and there is also a teacher accompaniment part. There are 5 levels to the books, and each book has, I believe, 4 to 5 pieces. So again, the arrangements are just really well done. There's a variety of pieces and styles in each book. And I often use that teacher accompaniment as a harder part if a student is a little bit more advanced in your class and needs a little bit more of a challenge. They can take that teacher accompaniment part and play that with the ensemble. And then they also have MIDI accompaniments available, and I really like the MIDI accompaniments when I'm playing an ensemble piece with my group class. So then now in the middle, I wanted to highlight these books. These I use as solo supplemental choices for my students. I think at some point, all of my classes have used these books in some way. They correlate to the Piano Adventures levels, but they do have different titles. So the book in the back, Chord Time Piano, that matches level Faber level 2B. The one in the middle, Fun Time Piano, matches Faber level 3A and 3B. And then the one in the front, Big Time Piano, matches level 4. And those are just the more common levels that I've used. And so the sample pages are there on the right. The feedback that I get from a lot of my adult students is that these songs are they're well arranged. They're very accessible. The music is really great. You can see the pages are very clean text, good spacing, good sizing, so very friendly for an adult to read. There's no childish pictures or text anywhere. So my adults really like these books. There's also a wide variety of books to choose from, so lots of different genres. You can see here the jazz and blues, classics, hymns. There's great Christmas tunes, Christmas books. There's also a favorites book, a popular book, and I think even a few others, rock and roll, a few others as well. So making it work in my adult classes, we obviously don't have to think about classroom management strategies with our adults, but I do want to think about what activities are needed for the pacing to be right in a class. So these are some things we've heard and we've talked about. I try to give my adults one thing that they can do by the next class, because a lot of their repertoire they're not going to get by the next class. That takes several weeks to work on. And so I try to give them one fun thing that they know they can accomplish and come back to class by the next week and be able to sit down and play it. And so I assign a lot of lead sheets. That's what we do for that. And I usually pick a lead sheet that is a simple 5-finger pattern melody. It's in a friendly key and usually just the primary chords in the left hand. So it's something that the students have already done and they know what those chords are. You can do so much more with these if you want to extend these and continue them in the classes. For example, you could talk a lot about the left hand accompaniment styles and the variety of ways you can play your left hand with a lead sheet. You can transpose these. That's a great extension of an activity if you have quick students. Transposing might scare some students right at first. A really easy way to get started with it is to just take it from the major key. For this one, for example, take it from the major key to the parallel minor. So you would just take it to F minor. And then last, you could make it a quick ensemble piece. And so we've already talked about, we've heard from Emily, how you take a solo piece and make it an ensemble piece. You can break it to 3, even to 4 parts. If you wanted to double up on the right hand or the left hand, take the right hand up another octave, maybe add thirds or sixths to that. And then lots of things you can do with the left hand. So that's a fun, if you're on clavinovas or digital instruments, you can pick those different voices and that makes that super fun also. So a great quick activity for that ensemble for your class. And then my other tip for the adult classes, those brain breaks that we heard about already, that I do think is really important to put somewhere in your class when they need a little moment to regroup and just to refocus before that next learning target will happen. It lets them just kind of get their energy back and get regrouped, and then they'll be ready to focus on that next learning target. So it can be music related. Again, as some things that Nan had suggested, it can be music related. It could be rhythm activities or listening. Improvisation is a fun one. I kind of think the non-musical activities are really fun. So maybe something like a puzzle. It could be even a visual puzzle, because I like with that you are incorporating some visual, spatial type awareness. So seeing patterns, seeing visual, some spatial things that of course can be related back to seeing patterns in your music, right? You may be familiar with the game Spot It. And I know that's a kid's game, but I've played that with my adults. This is really challenging for them. So that's a fun one to do. It can be something physical, again, like Nan demonstrated, to challenge coordination. It could be drawing something, tracing something, or trying to draw or copy something. It can be a fun icebreaker game, so it's just a getting to know you game. So many ideas, and you can Google look that up for more ideas if you would like. But those brain breaks are very, very important to consider about the pacing of your classes. So I'll end with just a quick shot of my studio setup. So my picture on the left is what I have set up for my online teaching. And this is my space for all of my online lessons. Right now, all of my online lessons are my private meetings. My group classes are small, and we have resumed those in person. So that's my lab on the picture on the right. And we do have plexiglass dividers to give a little bit of some space, barriers between the Clava Novas, and while we're wearing masks, even when we're in person. So mine looks somewhat similar to Emily's, with the laptop, the microphone, the camera overhead, and you can see all of my bins and baskets with those manipulatives. They house flashcards and signs and things to hold up when I can grab them right there while I'm teaching and have them at my arm's length. So that's all I have. I believe I'm going to turn this back over to Emily now, that we can end today with a breakout session. And if you've been with us before, you'll know what that is. It's a chance for us to just have a few minutes to chat with our colleagues and share any of those last ideas that you may want to talk about. So I will take this over to Emily now.
Hi. Again, thanks, Rebecca. Wonderful ideas for all of us. I think in the interest of time, we might pull an audible here and just answer a few questions, since we only have a couple minutes left until the hour is over, and we want to respect all of your time. So thank you so much for joining us today. If you have any questions that we can just answer quickly for you, or things that were unclear about our presentation, please do go ahead and raise your hands in your reactions, and then we can answer them as we can. I'll keep an eye out here. Nan and Rebecca, you do so too if you see anybody pop up. Yes. Theodora.
Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for the great presentation. I am starting a group piano class for adults at the Peabody Preparatory, and I'm thinking about using the Faber book, but I am wondering how long to make the class, whether I should make it 1 hour or 1 hour and a half, or even 2. And also how to do ensembles online. And do adults enjoy that? Do they enjoy collaborating, or do they prefer to work on their own? Because I'm gonna make it open to all ages, starting from 18 and up. So it's new for me.
Yeah, Rebecca, do you want to tag in on that one, because you have done a lot of work creating ensembles through?
Sure. So online, it's not possible to play at the same time. So you could send a part to a pre-recorded part to the students, and they could listen to that while they play. But online, it's not possible to play right together. It's just sound, right, and how that travels. So again, I would consider maybe making a quick recording, sending that to the students, and they could have that other part while they're playing, so they could hear what that sounds like. You could certainly check their parts individually, or like Nan suggested, maybe two people in a breakout session and they could just play for each other, if you wanted to do something like that. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, thank you. Unfortunately, I think it's really good thing to do ensembles, and that's
It is.
a big
It is.
regret right now that we can't do that. But
It is. Now, you could also talk to your students if they have digital pianos. You could ask them if they would like to have maybe a MIDI file sent to them. A lot of mine have digital instruments and they love playing along with those MIDI files at home. It allows them to speed up or slow down the tempo as needed. And so that could be an option as well. But just think through some of those things, knowing that you can't play in time together as a group when you're teaching online. It just means it's different. You just have to think through some of those steps and how you're going to adjust for that.
okay.
Yeah, and sometimes I think it's also possible just to have your students put themselves on mute, right? And you can play the teacher accompaniment parts and they play along with you live in the class. And I send a lot of MP4 files home for especially my adult students to practice the duets outside of the class as well. So, we all would much rather do the ensembles in person, but something I have to work around right now.
And I think Dr. Richardson, I think you said that Faber comes with MIDI. So have you used those?
Right. So the Piano Adventures Player app is an excellent tool, and you don't have to have any like you can have an acoustic piano, you can have a digital piano. My adult students have really enjoyed utilizing the Piano Adventures Player app. It's a free download, and then depending on what book you use, it's like $4 or $5 to download the book. You can do a sample trial. I think you get like 3 pieces for free to see if you like using it. But that's a way to kind of play in an ensemble when you're by yourself. You can take one hand away and you can play one hand. So you can be listening to the left hand while you play the right hand. You can adjust the tempo however you like it. You can have the orchestral background. You don't have to have the orchestral background. You can have the metronome on. You can have the metronome off. I find that if I just tell the students that's available, they won't use it. But if I take about 10 minutes in my class and I'm like, I'm going to show you this right now. Now, next class, everybody bring your phone or your iPad and I'm going to download it for you. Then they find it's a really nice tool. So, it's something to consider, since ensemble playing, you might have to, like Rebecca said, be creative. That is ensemble playing, but just kind of in a different way.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you so much.
Great. Any other questions? We'll go take 1 or 2 more, if there are any. Shireen, I see you. Okay, Shireen, you'll need to unmute yourself.
Okay, this was talking about you had 8 activities or so per lesson. How many minutes then do each of these activities end up taking?
That's a really good question. It depends. So my opening and closing activities last anywhere from 3 to 5 minutes apiece. Warm up is usually pretty quick, 1 to 2 minutes. That activity, that game, that brain break, that can be adjusted depending on how much time was spent on earlier activities. What usually takes the biggest chunk of time is that part that I put in the middle where I've got the new concept and the new repertoire piece. That's usually like a 10 or 12 minute block that I have. Everything else I try to move along between 3, 5, or 7 minutes. And it's not always exactly the same, but it's adjusted, and typically I'm able to get through it.
Yeah, and usually we say no more than 10 minutes per activity, right? No more than 10 minutes, because students are just going to you're going to lose them if you spend too long on something. So sometimes just isolating down to one concept and then reviewing it the next week and adding from there is necessary. Maybe one more question, if there are any out there. I don't see any right now. Nan and Rebecca, if you see any, go ahead and pop them up. All right, I don't actually see any questions, which is great. So Nan, can you pop up your first screen so that we can remind everyone when the next webinars are? So we would love to see you on November 5th or December 3rd, and those those webinars will always happen on Thursdays at 12 Mountain Time. And I mentioned that first just because that's where I am and that's how I calculate time. 1 o'clock Central and 2 o'clock Eastern. And you will get emails sent to you from MTNA where you can sign up for the Zoom link. So thank you so much for spending an hour with us this Thursday. It was wonderful to see all of you, and hopefully we said something that will be helpful for you to use in classes. So thank you so much.